Okay, I want you to imagine your nation's darkest hour. I mean, an unstoppable enemy is at the gates, the city is starving, and total destruction feels absolutely certain. Now imagine the one person who supposedly has a direct line to God is locked away in a prison cell. That's the absolutely wild setting for our story today. Let's dig into the prophecy that was born right there, in that very prison.
And this is exactly where our story kicks off. Not on some epic battlefield, but in the gloom of a prison courtyard. You have the prophet Jeremiah, in chains, but his confinement, well, it becomes a place of incredible revelation, not silence. And what's so fascinating is this contrast, right? While his entire world is physically crumbling just outside the walls, his spiritual freedom is about to unleash a message that will echo for centuries.
All right, so first things first, we really need to get a handle on the main character here, Jeremiah, and his very strange, very dangerous situation.
I mean, it seems completely backwards, doesn't it? When you're facing a national crisis of this magnitude, shouldn't you be listening to every single bit of guidance you can get, especially from someone who's believed to be a messenger from God? Why on earth would you lock that guy up?
Well, here's the thing. Jeremiah wasn't delivering these feel-good prophecies about a last-minute glorious victory. No, he was preaching inevitable defeat. He was going around telling the king, the army, the people that their fight was pointless and that the city was going to fall. So for King Zedekiah, this wasn't divine guidance, it was demoralizing propaganda. It was undermining the whole war effort. And in his eyes, that made Jeremiah a traitor.
Okay, so now let's zoom out from Jeremiah's little prison cell and look at the brutal reality that was unfolding all across Jerusalem. What exactly was happening outside those walls?
The enemy at the gates? They were the Chaldeans. Now this was the army of the incredibly powerful Neo-Babylonian Empire, led by the legendary and feared King Nebuchadnezzar II. We're talking around 586 BC, and these guys were the undisputed superpower in the region, and they had come to Jerusalem to conquer it, once and for all.
And they were absolute masters of siege warfare. The prophecy even mentions these things called mounts. What were they? Well, they were these enormous earthen ramps built by the Babylonian army. Just picture it. They would patiently pile up dirt, rock, and rubble right up against the city's high walls, creating a slope for their soldiers and their siege engines to roll right up and over the top. It was a slow, terrifying, and basically unstoppable tactic. Now, this is where you can really see the two clashing perspectives. On one hand, the people of Judah saw themselves as heroes bravely fighting for their homes and their city. But the prophetic message Jeremiah was delivering, it was grim. It said their desperate fight was completely futile. In fact, all their efforts to defend the city would only end up filling the houses with the bodies of the dead. Why? Because this wasn't just a military conquest. It was seen as a divine judgment.
And just when the situation seems utterly, completely helpless, the whole story takes this radical turn. From the depths of that prison, in the middle of all this chaos and destruction, comes one of the most powerful promises of hope and restoration you can possibly imagine.
But first, the message doesn't sugarcoat anything. It starts by acknowledging the brutal truth. God, speaking through Jeremiah, actually takes responsibility for the destruction, calling it the result of divine anger at the nation's wickedness. So there's just no escaping the judgment. It's real, and it's happening.
And then, the pivot. In the very next breath, the tone shifts from fury to healing. Behold, I will bring it health and cure. After declaring judgment, God immediately promises restoration. This is such a brilliant illustration of a core theme here, that the divine purpose goes way beyond destruction and into renewal. It is an absolutely stunning reversal.
And just look at how complete this promise is. This isn't just about patching things up. We're talking about total restoration. Physical health for the city, spiritual flourishing with peace and truth, the exiles coming home, rebuilding the whole nation to its former glory, and, this is the big one, a complete spiritual cleansing and forgiveness for the very sins that caused the whole disaster to begin with.
So, as we get to our final section, the big question is, did any of this actually happen? How did this incredible prophecy, delivered at rock bottom, actually play out in the real world?
Well, the historical timeline is pretty remarkable. First came the ruin. Just as Jeremiah had prophesied, Jerusalem fell around 586 BC. The city was leveled, and its people were dragged off into exile in Babylon. But then came the restoration. Decades later, in 538 BC, a whole new power, the Persian Empire, conquered Babylon.
And its king, Cyrus the Great, issued an amazing decree allowing the Jewish exiles to go home and rebuild their city and their temple.
So the key takeaway here is that this prophecy kind of has layers. You've got the near historical fulfillment, the actual physical return from exile and rebuilding the city, but the language, all that talk of complete spiritual cleansing and an abundance of peace, that pointed to a much broader, deeper hope. A future messianic restoration where the relationship between God and his people would be totally renewed.
And all of this leaves us with a final thought, one that resonates way beyond ancient history. The story of Jeremiah in prison shows us a promise of healing and restoration, being delivered not when things are good, but at the absolute worst moment imaginable. And it really forces us to ask ourselves, where is hope truly found when it feels like everything is lost?